Over the next few days, what you are going to hear in this courtroom is the story of the short life and horrible death of a little boy. A little boy who at the time he died was 18 months old. He was born June 25th, 2022 to his mother, Shayla Garnica, in Tallahassee, Florida. His father was Juwan Williams, and Julian knew that Shayla was pregnant, but was expecting the baby to be born the following week. She called him the day after the baby was born and said, "He's here now. He's been born." So Juwan Williams went to Tallahassee, and they celebrated the baby, and that talked about what to name him, and agreed to name him Jackson Drew Angeles, which is Shayla's her last name, like her I can't remember what the correct word is, but it's her last name was Angeles Garnica, and so the child was going to be Jackson Drew Angeles. Actually, she didn't do that. She did the birth certificate and she put Romeo Angeles on there, and as it turns out, actually, you'll hear Juwan Williams didn't even realize that the child's name was Romeo, as opposed to Jackson Drew, which they had agreed on, until after he had passed away. But he went by JD. That's what everybody called him. That's what his father called him. That's what his aunt called him. That's what his mother called him. He went by the name, by the initials JD, and he was ultimately solely in the custody of Juwan Williams. When the child was 3 or 4 months old, his mother was going to return to Mexico for something, and she contacted Julian and said, that she wanted to know if he had any problem with her taking the child to Mexico. And he said, yeah. He said, "I'd rather not." He said, "Why don't you just leave him with me?" And she said, okay. So he went to Tallahassee and he picked up JD and took him back to Colquitt, where he lived. And when he went back to Colquitt with the child, that essentially was the end of the mother's involvement with the child. She saw the child 2 or 3 times after that. Like when Julian took the child to Tallahassee to go to a doctor's appointment, whatever, she saw the child then, but she didn't keep him anymore. He didn't stay with her anymore. He lived from that point forward until his death. He lived with Juwan Williams. He lived with Juwan Williams and Julian's sister, Ashanti Burr, who was a little younger than he is. She's a college student now. And they lived with their mother in Colquitt. Her mother became ill. She was diagnosed with cancer. She was receiving radiation treatment, and the child couldn't be in the home with her because she was receiving radiation treatment. And so she ended up moving to another house that they owned, and so it was Juwan Williams and Ashanti, his sister, and the child living there. And Julian was the sole income. He was the sole wage earner, the sole support for the family, for his mother, for his sister, and for the child. And so he worked a lot. And when he was working, his sister was the person who took care of the child, sort of on a day-to-day basis. The mother ended up dying. I don't remember exactly when that was. Sometime in 2023, Julian's mother passed away, and so it was Julian and Ashanti and JD. Whatever the original origin was of the relationship, Juwan Williams became involved in a relationship with Trinity Poague, who is the defendant in this case. And she lived in, I think, in Donaldsonville, lived in South Georgia, down, further south. We're in South Georgia. Further South Georgia. When you're in Donaldsonville, this is North Georgia practically, where we are. But she was from there. She was from Donaldsonville, and she and Juwan Williams became involved in a relationship. And you're going to hear some things about the relationship, about as it progressed. And for now, I'm just going to sort of summarize it by saying that what I think you will hear is evidence that the relationship was very rocky, that it was sort of up and down, it was on again, off again. They were breaking up on Thursday and back together on Friday, and then she was going to break up with him on Saturday, and it hurt her feelings because he broke up with her before she could break up with him, and so on and so forth, over the course of many, many, many months. Trinity she was a college student. She started attending Georgia Southwestern in August of 2023. And so Julian often, on weekends when he was off work, he often would come up to Americus. He many times brought the child with him to Americus, and they stayed in her dorm, and she lived in the Oaks dormitory. She had a roommate, a young lady named Paris Permort, who you will hear from in this trial. And so Julian would bring the child up, and they would stay with her. They would stay with her there. Throughout all of this, one of the primary sources of friction that you will hear about, the primary sources of friction in this relationship, and what you will hear is this, that Trinity Poague resented this child. She resented this child because the child got more of Juwan Williams. Jay, he goes by Jay. Most people call him Jay Williams, and so if I say Jay or Julian, I'm talking about the same person. I'm talking about the child's father. But the child, JD, got a lot more attention from Jay than Ms. Poague did. In addition to that, the evidence will show that she resented the fact that she was sort of placed in a stepmother role, that wasn't the role she wanted to be in, that she wanted to have a family, she wanted to have children, she wanted to have a child or children with Jay Williams, but not that child. She wanted her own child with Jay Williams. And you will see and hear evidence in both in the form of text messages and people who knew Trinity Poague and who had conversations with her, and you'll hear from them about the things that she said, and you'll see some of the text messages that she said, and going all the way back to like August of 2023. She was expressing her anger about the child, her frustration about the child, that commented in a text message to her roommate that she really would just like to punch him, and it's like, well, I know that sounds terrible, because he's just a little boy, but still, I wish I could just punch him. And she makes those references and things like that continue throughout their relationship. So, coming up to the week of January 8th, January 9th of 2024, Jay Williams is here. He comes to America because he's working. He works at he'll tell you, I can't remember the name of the place, but it's in Bainbridge, and they build dams and bridges and things like that. They construct them there and then take them apart and ship them out and put them back together and all that. He's got a good job, and he fully supports this family and has since even before the child was born. But he would come to America sometimes, and then he'd go to work from here, and then come back to Americus during the weeks. And so he was in Americus for a couple of days and stayed at the dorm with Ms. Poague. And then he got a room here at a hotel, and they were going to have sort of a celebratory night, I suppose. And there was some fighting going on. It was trying to make up, and you'll hear all of that evidence. But the bottom line is that he's here on and off throughout that week. And then Saturday, he leaves here on Friday and goes work and he goes home and so he's in Colquitt and
if there are phones in the courtroom, they need to be cut off.
I don't know where mine is, so I'm sure it's not mine. So they're there that night on Friday, January 13th. He's there. I'm sorry, it's not Friday. Saturday, January 13th. He's in Colquitt and she's up here and she's somebody comes up with the idea of them meeting in Albany. Okay, so he's going to meet her in Albany. They're going to go to dinner and whatever. So he says, but I've got JD with me. Okay, so I'm going to have JD. And Trinity Poague says, that's fine, bring JD, I want to see JD too, and so bring JD, and so they meet in Albany and go to a couple of places, go get some food, and go to Sephora, the makeup store, and some other things. And then they're leaving there, and he's going to come with her to Americus, Saturday night. January 13th, 2024. And they haven't even gotten to Americus, okay? They hadn't even gotten to Americus before she begins texting her roommate, Paris Permort. And she says to Paris at 9:28 p.m. that night, she says to Paris something to the effect of, are you going to be, Paris worked nights. She worked nights at Magnolia Manor. And so she wasn't at the dorm. And so Ms. Poague texted her and said, are you coming back in the morning? Somehow I got stuck with JD. Okay, because JD was coming up here with his dad. And she says, he made me feel bad because it's late and JD's being fussy, so he asked if they could stay. Well, that's what she's telling the roommate. I think the evidence will be that that's not, in fact, what happened. Because they're in Albany, right? He can go back to Colquitt, which is 40 miles away, and she can come to Americus, which is 40 miles away. But she wants him to come to Americus, so he's coming to Americus, and she's complaining to the roommate because JD's going to be there. Because JD's going to be in Americus with him. She texts Paris, her roommate. I say roommate, sweet mate. You'll see the breakup of the room. You go in the door and there's a sink and a bathroom and a little lobby area and then 2 rooms. Okay, so she texts Paris and she says, I can't do being around JD anymore. He hates me and I hate him. It's what she's telling Paris even while she's driving to Americus with the child in her car. She put the child in her car and Jay was following them up here. So they get here. And Paris wants to see the child. She's seen him. She's met him several times, when he was up here. And she adored him. She thought that he was, the sweetest little thing in the world. And so she wanted to see the child. So she says, she's gonna come over there. And she's, she says, I want to come see my child. And Ms. Poague says, you want me to stop by your work? And Paris says, no, I'll come to the dorm in a little while. When I have a break, I'll come. And so she does. She goes over there a little after they get there. They get to the dorm that night, a little after 10, and then right after that, just a few minutes after that, Paris comes to the dorm, visits with the child for a few minutes, and then leaves and goes back to work. Later that night, Trinity Poague texted Paris and said, "Is it okay if I sleep in your room?" She says, "I just need a break. I need a mental break. JD isn't asleep, and Jay is knocked out all over the bed, and I didn't want to play the TV in there," etc. That's about 11:30, 11:45 or so on Saturday night, January 13th. She tells Paris, Paris says, "Well, why don't you wake him up and tell him to help get JD to sleep?" And Trinity Poague says to Paris, she says, "I did, and he just put him beside him and let him roll off the bed." That's what she tells Paris. I think that message was at, you will hear, 11:57 p.m. Now, the sleeping arrangements in that room where there was an air mattress, and the air mattress was blown up, and it was at the end of the bed, the foot of the bed, of Ms. Poague's bed, and Ms. Poague and the child were sleeping on the air mattress, and Jay was sleeping on her bed. And so when she talks a bit about the child, quote, rolled off the bed, she later clarifies in a subsequent message the next afternoon to Paris. She says, back up. Paris says, "What?" Yeah? And she goes, "Oh, it's fine. He's okay. He's okay. He's fine." And not only does she say he's okay, he's fine, but she has her phone out and she takes some videos, some short videos of the child after the child has supposedly fallen off of the bed. And the child is sitting up and he's calm and he's quiet and looks like a normal, sleepy little kid, who's sort of playing with, moving his hands around, playing with Miss Poague, and looks for all the world just, like everything is perfectly okay. There's no bruises, there's no marks on him, there's no anything. There weren't any bruises on him when he got here, okay, like on his face or on his body. There weren't any marks, wasn't suffering from any kind of medical condition, wasn't in need of medical care or anything else, okay, when he had gotten here with his daddy. But she says to Paris, she goes, "He's fine, he's okay." And the next day she clarifies and she goes, Paris says, "Well, I thought you said he rolled off the bed." And she says, she says, first she says, I don't know. I was asleep. I don't know if he fell off the bed or didn't fall off the bed. That's what she tells Paris. A few hours after she told Paris he rolled off the bed. Then she tells Paris, when Paris asks about it again, says, "Well, did he fall off the bed last night or not?" And she says, yeah. She says, "But that was only off the air mattress, and the air mattress wasn't that far from the ground." And then, of course, you'll see there is an air mattress that's in the room. I mean, by the time the room is searched and photographed and so forth, the air mattress, before Jay Williams had left the room that Sunday morning, the air mattress was folded up, put in the closet, etc. So in any event, to get back to that night, she had texted Paris and said he fell off the bed, etc. But the child's up. She takes videos. He's fine. He's calm. He's playing. Doesn't have a mark on him. Doesn't appear to be in any distress whatsoever. He went to bed that night. Slept all night long that night. Okay? Slept until 9:30 or 10 o'clock on Sunday morning, the 14th. He woke up and, okay, I have a 4-year-old grandson and I might do this, okay? So I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with this, okay? But this is what the child was given to eat, okay? When he woke up on Sunday morning, it was Fritos, twisty Fritos, the swirly chips, Fritos chips, and Mountain Dew in his sippy cup, okay? But that's what the child has, and the child is sitting in a chair. There's one of those like saucer-style chairs, big round thing sits on a frame, and the child is in the chair, put in the chair, and is sitting there eating Fritos and drinking Mountain Dew and watching TV. and everything is fine. Jay Williams left. They were going to get lunch. He ordered pizza, okay? He left the dorm, and you're going to see a video that just shows him, it's just a few seconds of the video, but it's just video from the dorm, and you'll see, like, you'll be able to make notes of the times that people came and went at the dorm. But he left, I think it was 11:55, 11:56 or something like that, Sunday morning, to go to Walmart to get some drinks and to go pick up a pizza for food. When he left, his son was in good health. He was gone 35 or 36 minutes. As he was coming back, he gets a call from Trinity Poague, who says something to the effect of, I don't know what happened, but he's not breathing. And so Jay Williams pulls up to the dorm, and he goes into the dorm, and you'll see him. He's got a Walmart bag and a Pizza Hut box in his hands. And he goes through the door, and when he gets to the room, she's holding his baby, and the child appeared to be in great distress. He tossed the pizza on the bed. He dropped the Walmart bags on the floor. He picked the baby up, and he took off. He rushed out the door with the baby, headed to Phoebe Sumter, to the emergency room. The child was so sick at that point that the child was throwing up on him. May have started throwing up when he was in the dorm, in the room. I think what you hear is Jay Williams will testify. I mean, there's some evidence the child might have thrown up, like as they were going out the door. Jay Williams will testify that he doesn't really know when he started throwing up, but it was like in the car. It was when he, threw up on his clothes, etc. Gets to the emergency room. Not breathing. They take the child in. The child is in grave distress at this point. There's no pulse. He's not, no heartbeat, no blood pressure, no breathing, no anything. And they take the child and start performing CPR, and I'll try. They were going to life flight him out to Dr. Busman, who will testify in this case. Dr. Busman testified he'd made arrangements with Eggleston Hospital in Atlanta, the Children's Hospital in Atlanta, for the child to go up there. They made arrangements. They were going to fly him, helicopter the child out, life flight to Eggleston. As soon as they could get him stable, they never were able to get him stable enough to fly. A little after 4 o'clock, about 3 hours after he had gotten to the hospital, J.D. Angeles took his last breath. This child that when he came to Americas from Colquitt on Saturday, didn't have a mark on him, didn't have any injury, wasn't in any distress. When Jay Williams left to go to pick up pizza, the child was sitting up, eating, not in any distress, didn't have a mark on him. But by the time the child got to the emergency room, after spending 35 minutes in that room with Trinity Poague, this is what the child had. He had fresh bruising on his face. There was a fresh bruise, a visible, immediately visible bruise on the right side. Right side of his forehead. There was a bruise on the right side of his neck. There was a bruise on his cheek. There was a much bigger bruise on his other cheek. And you'll hear some testimony. You'll hear some testimony from the medical examiner and maybe others about what kind of a bruise this was. It's what they call a pattern bruise. Okay, it's something that when a doctor, when a medical examiner, somebody who's trained and experienced, looks at it, they say, I know what caused that bruise because it's like a bruise, and there's a little break, in the skin, whatever was not bruised, and there's another bruise, and it's called a pattern bruise because it's something that is known as the kind of bruise you get from a hard slap to the face, or from this kind of a thing, this kind of a pinch to the face. So there's that bruise on the left side. He's bleeding from his brain. There are bruises, multiple bruises, 4, 5, or more fresh bruises on the top of this child's head. Okay? Here and here and here and here, and in the temporal parietal region, which I think means right here. Okay? And up here at the top of his head. And that's not all. On the back of his head, this bone right here at the bottom of the bottom of the skull, okay, that sort of dish shape that kind of goes in, okay, sort of naturally protected by your shoulders and by the crown of your head. This bone here at the bottom of his skull, the occipital bone, is fractured. Not only is the occipital bone fractured, but he has a massive hemorrhage in that location at the back of his head. A hemorrhage that was causing a hematoma, collection of blood, that was so fresh and so immediate that the people at the emergency room are like, you can feel it. You can put your hands on it, you can feel the blood built up right here at the back of JD's head. That is an injury that I believe the evidence will show is referred to as catastrophic. It's an acute injury. It's not an injury that happened hours before or days before. It's not an injury that could have happened the night before. It's not an injury that could have happened realistically. It's not an injury that could have happened from a child falling off of a bed or falling out of a chair or anything else. It's an injury that essentially requires applied force to that particular part of the head. And it's an injury that could literally only have occurred within a few minutes' time before this child was presented at the emergency room. Couldn't have happened last night. Couldn't have happened 4 hours ago, or 5 hours ago, or even 2 or 3 hours ago. It can't be, to the moment clear about when the injury occurred. But I think what you would hear across the board from the medical testimony in this case, you're going to hear not only from the medical examiner, but you're also going to hear from both of the treating physicians that treated this child at Phoebe Sumter Medical Center, at the ER, in the emergency room. That's Dr. Bussman and Dr. Olek. And they're going to say, that injury didn't happen before. That injury had to have happened in a very brief time, just a few moments before the child presented at the emergency room. And believe it or not, that's still not all. In addition to the multiple impacts, the multiple points of impact, the multiple injuries that was causing his brain to bleed here and here and here and here and here, in addition to that, J.D. Angeles had a massive laceration of his liver, okay, which is down here this part of your body, where his liver is. And there's a massive laceration of the liver. And the laceration of the liver is to the right lobe of the liver. In this case, the lobe of the liver that basically is away from the front of the body. Okay, not it happens from falling forward or landing on the front part of your body. It's an injury that's off back here. It's causing him to bleed profusely in his abdomen. The evidence will be, the medical testimony that you'll hear is going to be pretty clear, though, that this is not the injury that killed the child. Okay, the injury that killed the child is the injury to his head. There's really not going to be any medical dispute about that. But there's nonetheless a massive laceration of the liver. It's not a chronic condition. It's not a condition that could have built up over time. It's not blood that would have collected over some long period of time. Okay, it's an injury that occurred acutely, that occurred sometime in the minutes or hours before the child was at the emergency room. Some of the injuries, like the bruises, for instance, what the testimony will be is that they're acute, they're fresh. But nobody can really age a bruise, okay? They can't look at a bruise and say that bruise is less than an hour old, okay? An hour-old bruise doesn't look much different than an 8-hour-old bruise, okay? The one injury, the single injury that can really be aged in this case, that the doctors can take a position, a firm position, and say this injury had to have occurred in this time frame, was the catastrophic injury to the fracture of the occipital bone, the hemorrhage, and the occipital bone was fractured so hard, okay, the extent of the fracture was significant enough that it caused the skull, this child's skull, to separate, okay, on this side of his head. Okay, like, everybody's seen pictures of skull, skeletons type of thing, and the skull is 4 or 5 different pieces, okay, and those pieces you hear they're laced together, okay, like the bone of the skull laces together, okay, it's something called, the one that's in question in this case is called the lambdoidal suture, okay, and the suture is just where the pieces of the skull join together. Okay, and the impact to the back of this child's head was so severe that it caused the lambdoidal suture, which is up here on the scalp, caused it to separate. Okay, that's the injury that can be dated in time. But the others, the bruises, the injury to the liver, are all consistent with that same time frame, and the evidence will be that they're all acute, they're all fresh, and you're going to see pictures of this child from just a few hours before where there aren't any of these injuries, okay? There aren't any of these injuries on him. There's no injuries to his face. There's no marks on his face. There's no knots on his head. There's no swelling of his abdomen. There's no vomiting. There's no illness that occurs or is associated with head trauma. The only time that is present is at the conclusion of what was essentially the last 35 minutes of this child's life, when he was in the sole company of the defendant, Trinity Poague. I'll tell you what evidence I don't have. It's not going to hear. I don't. Nobody saw what she did. Okay, nobody saw what she did to inflict these injuries. Okay, there's not a video from inside of her dorm room, and I think you may hear. Some hypotheses, could this have happened? Could that have happened? Could this have caused this injury? Could that have caused this injury? And so forth. But the bottom line is, nobody knows for sure what happened, except that J.D. Angeles was the victim of severe and sudden head trauma and abdominal trauma. Something that they will, I think that the phrase that you may hear from one or more of these doctors is something called inflicted trauma. Okay? Inflicted trauma as opposed to accidental trauma. There are some earmarks, there are some distinctions that the clinical presentation of a patient, there's some distinctions between patients who present with accidental injuries and patients who present with injuries that are the result of inflicted or applied trauma. You're going to hear the story of the last few days and the last few minutes of J.D. Angeles' short life. And you're going to hear about the details of his horrible death. And ultimately, when all the evidence is in and the case is closed, I'll come back and talk to you again. And what I will ask you for then is simply this: that as a jury, that you collectively say, we are going to hold accountable, we are going to hold responsible the person, the only person who could have inflicted these injuries on this 18-month-old baby. And the way you will show that accountability and make that finding of accountability and responsibility is by returning a verdict of guilty on the charges that the state has brought against this defendant.
Mr. Gamble for the defendant.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court.
Yes, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, as I told you yesterday morning, my name is T. Gamble. It's my privilege today to represent Trinity Poague. You've heard what the state says the evidence is going to show in this case, and it will not be surprising to you, I don't think, that we disagree with at least some of what the state has to say as to what this evidence is going to show. Now, there are certain parts of the evidence we will all agree on. There's no question about that. But I'm going to tell you what we believe the evidence is really going to show you about this case. You're going to see that this is a case that the state has made that is filled with suspicion, but is completely empty of evidence. You're going to see that this case is not about a young 18-year-old girl who was dating a 23-year-old man and in some reason or another caused great harm to an 18-month-old child. Because you're going to see from the facts of this case that this case is about a victim. Not just one victim, but two victims. One victim is readily apparent. That's J.D. This is an 18-month-old child that had tragic injuries. There's no question about that. But the second victim sits at this table right here, right behind me. That victim is Trinity Poague, because she has been accused of a crime she did not commit based upon speculation that is incorrect. Because you're going to see from the evidence that what occurred here is nothing to do with Trinity Poague's hands, nothing to do with any violence she would have ever have done toward the child. The evidence is going to show you that Trinity Poague was 18 years old at the time she was accused of this crime. She had graduated from high school the spring before that. She had graduated with honors. She had received a scholarship from the Jimmy Carter Scholarship Program. She agreed to come to Georgia Southwestern under that scholarship program to get a degree in nursing. She had just completed her first semester of school, making straight A's, when it began the second semester in January of 2024. Now, when she first entered Georgia Southwestern back in August of 2023, she had a relationship of boyfriend-girlfriend with Juwan Williams, who you've already heard a little about. Juwan Williams is 23 years old. She's 18. This relationship, as has already been described and we acknowledge, was volatile. It was an immature relationship. one in which they argued and fought and broke up and got back together and broke up and got back together. The breakups were usually on an hour or two, fussing over text messages or whatever. But you will see from that evidence and all that you will hear from the courtroom that Juwan Williams was a controlling boyfriend. He wanted to know everything about what Trinity Poague was doing. He wanted to know the passwords for every bit of her social media, Snapchat, Facebook, TikTok, whatever it may be. He wanted complete access. That when he text messaged when he was away, he wanted a response immediately. He wanted to know that she was not going anywhere when she was in college where she would talk to other men. He did not want her to do anything. He was a controlling factor in their relationship. But at the same time, Trinity Poague at the time thought she was in love with Juwan Williams. And so as time went on from August until January when this event occurred, Juwan Williams would come to see her at Georgia Southwestern College and spend the night quite often. He spent every weekend, virtually every weekend with her. And most days he spent at least a couple of times during the weekday with her. And almost all of those times when he did that, he was alone. Now, Trinity knew that he had a child. The child was JD that you've already heard about. When she first started dating him, that was in June of 2023. The child was approximately a year old. She did not meet JD immediately. She met JD later. But when she did meet JD, Juwan was fine and dandy with her taking the child off by herself and doing whatever she wanted to do as far as shopping or things of that nature, because he knew that Trinity had experience with young children. Because Trinity, from the time that she was 11 years old until she was 18, had babysat for numerous people in Donaldsonville. Numerous times would take care of their children. And oftentimes the children she took care of were of the age of JD, under a year to a 2-year-old child. And so she was real secure in doing so. And you're going to see that most of the time, though, the child was not with JD, was not with Mr. Williams, who's known as Jay, because he would leave the child with his sister. As you heard already, he and his sister were living together. And in reality, the sister was caretaker of this child. Mr. Williams didn't take the child with him unless he had to. You're here on the weekend he had the child here on January was because the sister all of a sudden couldn't keep the child. When he came on the weekdays, he didn't bring the child with him. When he came on the weekends, for the most part, he didn't take the child with him. And when he did bring the child, he would give the child to Trinity to take care of. I believe you'll hear testimony that Trinity was the one that bathed the child, clothed the child, got the child ready for bed. If you see any photographs or any videos that are introduced of the couple, you'll see that Trinity is normally holding the child. She carried him. She took care of him. It's an indication Mr. Williams expected someone else to take care of the child. Now, the child had an unusual circumstance in that it was born to a mother that has now given the child up to Mr. Williams. Excuse me. Mr. Williams is not recognized as the legal father of the child. He's not legitimated the child or done anything to have a court declare that he actually is the father, but we're not really arguing about whether or not he's the biological father. But when the child was born, the lady was married to someone else who's not in the picture as well. But the lady that gave him up just told her to come get him, has not seen the child since she gave him to Juwan Williams. Now, Juwan Williams has had the child for about a year or more. And during this time that he's had this child, not one single time you can see from the evidence has he taken the child to the doctor. Not one time. For your normal checkups, for your normal monthly and quarterly and all the things that you do for young children. None at all. And you're going to see, in addition to failing to do that, that on the weekend that is in question in this case has been talked about, in which he came to see Trinity. This was an unexpected visit with the child. It was an unexpected visit, but Trinity did not know the child was coming, did not mind that the child was coming, but was not prepared for the child to be there. As an example, would not have had food at the dorm for the child, that type of thing. But that when Mr. Williams arrived, he was drinking. And he was drinking with the child, riding from Bainbridge to Americans. And that he met Trinity in Albany, Georgia. And when he met her, they were going to Chipotle to have something to eat. And they sat down to eat there, but they did not have some of the things they normally have. And Trinity asked could they go somewhere else because they didn't have what she wanted. So before they left from Chipotle, they were going to go to McDonald's. Before they went, they took the car seat out of Mr. Williams' vehicle and put it in Trinity's vehicle. And they did that because they knew, or Trinity knew, that Mr. Williams was drinking. He didn't need to be driving with that child. So they go to the trouble to take the car seat out of one vehicle, put it in the other vehicle. Trinity and the child went to eat at McDonald's. Now when they went to eat at McDonald's, this is Saturday, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, sometime in that range, the child did not eat when he was given his food. But he's a young child. It's not unheard of for a child not to eat. Trinity didn't think anything particularly about that. They then decided to go to America's. And Trinity had already decided, yes, she had sent text about she'd prefer that she not see him that night, not just the child, but Mr. Williams. But she realized Mr. Williams was drinking. She couldn't just send him back home with the child because he would be driving with the child. So she agreed to come back to America's that night. They came back to the dorm that night. And when they came to the dorm that night, they had planned on spending the night, and Mr. Williams went to sleep very early. I would suggest to you that he passed out because he had been drinking. And that left Trinity with the child. Now, some of what was said earlier about facts are not exactly correct. Trinity did text her roommate and ask could she use her room, but not to sleep. If you read the text, it was actually to watch TV, because that will be separate in a way, not to go to sleep. But she had the child, and she was up with it, and Mr. Williams was asleep. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the rest of this situation as far as the facts of what happened from there forward in just a moment. But first, let me tell you a little bit about the investigation that has occurred in this case. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, along with America's Police Department, you'll see from the evidence, are the two main investigatory agencies we're trying to determine what happened here. And in doing so, they had a right to interview people and try to find facts and all those things. And you will see that they will have no evidence concerning the location of where a supposed crime scene occurred, and they'll have no evidence about a crime occurring at all. In other words, you'll see no blood evidence, you'll see no DNA evidence, you'll see no spittle evidence, you'll see no throw-up evidence. You may hear about throwing up coming up somewhere, but you'll see no evidence of it. You'll need to see no blood splatter. You'll see nothing that will indicate that a violent action occurred in the dorm where Trinity Poague lives. Nothing. It'll be zero. You will see lots of photographs. They took photographs, over 150 photographs of the dorm area. They took photographs of garbage, all kinds of evidence. They'll have nothing. And more importantly, you'll see that the GBI and the American Police Department committed two severe violations of normal protocol. One involved they took in from the trash. They had video of people coming in and out delivering trash to the dumpster, and coming from the dorm room of where Trinity lived. The trash was taken out, so they took that trash, went out there into the green dumpster, and pulled it out. And they went through it, and it was just normal stuff, like empty cola cans and that kind of thing. Had 3 diapers in there. 3 diapers were wrapped up. They unfolded those diapers. They took pictures of the folded up diaper first. Then they took pictures of the diapers after they were opened up. 2 of them were of no real note. I think they may have had urine or something. It's hard to tell. The third one was full of fecal matter. But in that fecal matter, from the naked eye, it appeared to have blood in it. And it appeared to have blood because that's the coloration of it and the way you're looking at it. And the importance of that was, and is, it was taken enough importance to have a picture taken of it and to be marked. The photograph numbers show which number it is. But after they took that, and the first time that we saw it as a defense, we filed a motion to ask that there be a test done on that fecal matter to see if there was blood in it. Because if there was blood in the fecal matter, it would show that it had been quite some time between injury and that occurred. You can't have blood if it just happened, it wouldn't be blood in the fecal matter. In this case, the diaper was not the one the child was wearing when it went to the hospital. It had a diaper on when it went to the hospital. So you know that this diaper came from previous time, sometime in the past time period. But GBI and American Police Department, When we asked to do that test, turned out they threw it away. Threw away the evidence. They do not have it. They will not be able to explain why they don't have it, other than they did not feel like it was important enough to keep. The second protocol violation, I'll just wait and you'll just listen when you come to court. You will see they violated a very serious normal protocol for the way cases are handled. And you will see that as I question some of their witnesses. But you will see that this investigation also failed in many ways. They interviewed Ms. Poague, they interviewed Mr. Williams, they interviewed quite a few people. But most of the people they interviewed, almost all, were the folks that knew Ms. Poague. Almost all of them. Everyone in the dorm, every friend they could find out, anything they could, trying to find out what was going on here. But you'll see when it came time to interview Mr. Williams. Now remember, he's the caretaker of this child. And when it comes time to interview his sister, Miss Ashanti Burke, they interviewed them, but no one else. They didn't interview anybody who knew him. They didn't interview about what was going on. They didn't interview anything about what might have happened. They didn't interview anyone on that side because there was a rush to judgment in this case. You'll see the GBI got in this case early, said that Trinity Poague was the last person that was with the child. The child was in distress. She must have done it. From that point on, there was no effort to do anything but try to prove that Trinity Poague was the person that did it. But they had problems, as I said, when they went to the dorm room and they scoured it trying to find evidence. They found nothing. That did not support their theory very much. So they then have said they think it had to be within a time frame, a very short time frame, that this occurred. That's the only explanation. That way it would make it where it could be no one else. Now understand, Trinity Poague was only around the child this time from Saturday around 6 o'clock or so until Sunday at noon. And really she was around the child most of that time with Mr. Williams. If any injury or anything happened to this child any other time period, it absolutely could not be Trinity Poague. And that's important to note because there are some things that occurred here. When Mr. Williams was interviewed, and I believe when he testifies, he will have to admit that he told various stories about what he thought had happened to the child after he got to the hospital. You will see, that I believe, from Dr. Busman's notes that the first thing he told them was that the child had fallen face down, face first, 5 minutes before he brought the child to the hospital. I don't know where he got that particular statement from, but that's what he told them. He later told police officers the same story, that the child had fallen. And he told Trinity Poague and one of the police officers at one time that the child had fallen on Friday. In addition to that, we know a few things about what may have happened with the child as well. We know that J.D. spent the night, as I told you, in the room. If they got back from going to eat, when they got back, Mr. Williams is out. He's out cold. And we know he's out cold because there was reports from other people in the dorm that sometime midnight forward, at least 2 people reported they heard the child crying loud enough that it woke them up. And we also know that Mr. Williams said, I don't know anything about that. And finally admits he didn't wake up. And I would suggest to you that evidence shows there's a reason he didn't wake up, for what I told you a moment ago, because he had been drinking enough that he would not wake up. But Trinity Poague was awake during those time periods. And Trinity you have seen that what they've already talked about with the text message, that she acknowledged that the child fell off the bed that night. Now she said the first time he fell off the bed, but I think he's okay. The second time when they asked, she said, well, it was really just the blow-up mattress. But I think you will see that when that statement was made was from the hospital, as they were waiting to find out what was going on. And by that time, there had already been allegations being thrown against her. And I believe that you will find that Mr. Williams had wanted to make sure that no one said anything about the child falling off the bed. The bed's important because this bed's not like normal beds. in the sense that your normal bed's not too high off the ground. This bed is 40 inches above the ground because you can store stuff below it. That means it's about this high. It's pretty high. If you'll see from, I believe, the investigation, that the flooring in that dorm room is a concrete tile floor. Very hard surface is what I believe the investigation showed. So it's something, if you fall on or hit, will cause great damage and can cause harm. And we know that the child fell off of that bed at that time because of the statements they were already made, and because we know from the dorm that the child was crying. Now, was that enough to cause these injuries? I know the state will say that is not the case, but there's a few things I believe that will be acknowledged or admitted by the medical people that will come testify today. One is any child under 3 and certainly under 2 is not physically developed yet. And in one place they're not physically developed is the skull. Their skull has not joined together and become a solid structure that protects. It is sort of apart. So any evidence, in fact, that the skull was somehow separated could very well be that the skull has not yet formed to be together. But because it's not totally together, a young child is much more susceptible to injury from a fall than would be an adult human being, and can get much more catastrophic injury from what would seem to be a rather unimportant fall, can cause great harm to a child. In addition to that, the same holds true for internal injuries. A child's organs are much larger than your organs because they've already grown in size almost to the adult size, even though they're a small child. So they're very susceptible to a fall because it's a small area with a large organ that if it falls can cause injury. And I believe that's important to know that that could be part of what could have happened. We don't know why Mr. Williams said the child fell on Friday, but there's also evidence I believe can show that if you have one fall compounded by another fall, it can cause some injury that then gets magnified by the second fall. But if we go back to the night in question that this happened, on the fall from the bed, we know that that happened. The next morning, when everyone wakes up, it appears that, by all testimonies that will come in, that the child appeared to be okay. They got up rather late that morning, except for one thing. The child, again, did not eat and did not drink. The child would not eat and would not drink the night before. Everyone will agree with that part. Did not eat its meal. Gets up the next morning at almost 12 by this time and still is not eating and not drinking. And we know that not from testimony so much. We do know there were some chips that were crushed up in Mountain Dew given to the child, but the medical examiner and the medical records will show the child had no food in its stomach at all, had no food or any substance in its mouth. The child was not eating for some reason, which of course could cause concerns, but only if you looking back to now seeing their problems. But when the child didn't eat, it was just sitting there not eating, and that's when they decided to go get pizza. The father went to get pizza. Now, when he went to get pizza, Miss Poague said she was going to go with him. She and the child would go along with him. But he said, no, you just stay here. And prior to them going to get pizza, she and Mr. Williams had taken a shower together. And this was right before he would then get out of the shower and leave. He got out of the shower before she did. He got out of the shower about 5 minutes before she did, because she remained in the shower and shaved her legs. And that took some time, as you might imagine. When she got out of the shower, Mr. Williams was holding the child who was crying rather loudly. But that was not unheard of, because the child was fussy from time to time and had been fussy during this occasion by not eating. Trinity Poague did not think a lot about it at the time, but the child calmed down. Mr. Williams put him in his little seat, and he left to get the food. When he came back, the child was all of a sudden in distress. Trinity Poague will tell you Trinity Poague's testimony would be that she was cleaning up around the house and didn't see anything unusual until she looks and sees that the hit child is not able to hold his head up as it should. She called her boyfriend because she knew he was not far away and it would be quicker to get the child to get medical attention to go straight ahead than to call some emergency. He went to the hospital. She followed behind at the hospital. And that's when they came to be interviewed. They were interviewed on many occasions by police officers. Mr. Williams gave conflicting stories on various things on several occasions. And he was interviewed some, but as I said, nothing was followed up. Now, when you look at the whole totality of this case, ladies and gentlemen, it's easy to just first blush say, well, she was there last, must be the person. But this case requires evidence. It requires proof. Trinity Poague should not be accused of this crime. I know that when you go back to the jury room, you will want to find justice, and I understand that because you do have one victim, a young child. But in seeking justice in this case, do not let justice be found at the cross of innocent blood. Because Trinity Poague did not commit this violent act. And Trinity Poague is not guilty of the crime she's been accused of, and that is the proper verdict that you should render at the end of this trial. Thank you.